honored and excited to be interviewing two amazing people who are committed to facilitating the growing awakening of humanity. Dr. Eben Alexander is a neurosurgeon who, during his more than 20-year career, has taught and had appointments at Duke University Medical Center, Harvard Medical School, University of Massachusetts Medical School, the University of Virginia Medical School, and Boston's Children's Hospital, and that's probably not naming everything. He's also the author of the books Proof of Heaven, Map of Heaven, and along with his partner Karen Newell, Living in a Mindful Universe. Karen has spent a lifetime dedicated to seeking wisdom through esoteric teachings and firsthand experience, exploring realms of consciousness and empowering others by demonstrating how to connect to inner guidance, achieve inspiration, improve wellness, and develop intuition. And she is the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, and along with Eben, the co-author of that book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Good morning to both of you.
Morning, Val. How are you?
I'm good.
Good morning.
It is thrilling to have you guys here. It's so exciting. We met you in Rockport, Maine this past summer. Donna and I discovered your book online and got it and were enthralled to the point that we drove quite a distance to come and see you speak. It was very, very exciting stuff. I'd like to start by talking about what you are doing together now, Sacred Acoustics, and what is binaural beats? What is binaural audio, and what's happening in the brain when people are using this stuff?
Yeah, I can start a bit of that. And some of this is conjecture. We're not absolutely sure, but the general idea, binaural beats were a phenomenon discovered by a Prussian physicist named Heinrich Wilhelm Dove back in the mid-1800s. And what he found was that if you present a pure tone to one ear of a given frequency, and then a very slightly different tone to the other ear, say, for example, 100 hertz, 100 cycles per second, one ear, 104 hertz in the other ear, what happens is somewhere in the brain, there's a signal generated that's the arithmetic difference between the two. So 100 hertz, 104 hertz, and either ear would give you a 4 hertz signal. And it's a very strong kind of wavering
What
sound.
it sounds like to the person listening is a wah, wah, wah. And depending on what hertz we're delivering, that wah, wah will be faster or slower.
And the general idea behind all this is that these tones, what was found by Robert Monroe and other investigators in the 20th century, is that these tones, using this kind of differential frequency of what's generically called binaural beats, can engender altered states of consciousness. And Robert Monroe popularized using binaural beats to facilitate out-of-body experiences. Other investigators realized that remote viewing, the ability of psychic spies to discern information, was enhanced through this. And I believe what's going on, just a short circuit right to the answer here, is that these tones are influencing a circuit in the lower brainstem. And I won't go into all the details of that, but the bottom line is it has a very profound influence on consciousness and on setting consciousness free. Most of the sounds we're used to listening to, chants, anthems, hymns, etc., are processed in the acoustic cortex, and something evolved over the last few million years, whereas these tones, sacred acoustics and that kind of differential frequency brain entrainment, are processed in a circuit more than 300 million years old in the lower brainstem. Anyway, that's the kind of short answer.
What we're trying to do is get people into lower states of awareness away from the everyday. So the everyday, when measured on an EEG, is the beta state of awareness. It's measured as 12 to 30 hertz. But what we like to do is get people into those lower states, the delta, theta, alpha, that are associated with relaxation, with meditation, and with these expanded states of awareness.
And also with sleep and deep dreamless sleep. So we can match EEGs and kind of put the brain in a state that resembles those deeper states of consciousness, and yet do it in a fashion that preserves conscious awareness. And that's where the real power comes in.
Well, as a long-time meditator, I took TM in the late 80s. I can tell you that the experiences that I've had with your stuff is profound. It's amazing. And I noticed that you tune it. I don't know if you're trying to get us to different brainwave states, whether they're alpha or theta or whatever. Some of the stuff is higher pitch, some of the stuff is lower frequency, but it's very, very profound and powerful. We do it every single night, so it is
powerful.
It is very, very wonderful. Do you find that people have common experiences when utilizing this?
There are a lot of common experiences, but the thing to remember is that each of us is unique. Each of us has different brainwave states to begin with. In fact, a recent article came out that stated that brainwaves can be used like fingerprints. That's how unique they are from one person to the next. So if we're all listening to the same, say, we always use 4 hertz as our example. If you're all listening to the same 4 hertz, we don't all have the same experience because our brain starts in a different place. But generally speaking, some common patterns are people will get very relaxed. Some people will feel their body kind of vibrating or tingling. Others will have their thoughts kind of fade into the background. A lot of people have trouble with meditation because they can't stop that racing mind. I know I was one of those people. And binaural beats really helped to allow me to quiet my thoughts, to get more relaxed, and then all kinds of things can happen. People have different visions. They have connections with departed loved ones who have passed on. It really is a very wide range of experiences that people can have. But the best way to find out, really, for each person is to go listen to our free sample that's available on sacredacoustics.com. The best way to find out how these work is to experience it yourself. And we'd love to hear from our listeners of different experiences people have had because they really are very wide-ranging. People use them in health situations, or if they just want to study harder. It's really just quieting the brain so we can do all the many things that we'd like to do with a quieter brain that's more focused and settled.
Right. That free piece you're talking about, I believe, is Om 7, which is what got us hooked and started. And it's really amazing.
Yes, it is.
Very powerful.
And it's 20 minutes, which is exactly the transcendental meditation, the TM that you spoke of. 20 minutes is exactly the length that is recommended by a lot of meditation teachers.
Absolutely, yeah. I told you when I saw you that I saw faces of people that I didn't know. This was a repetitive thing for probably 6 weeks or 2 months, and you said that was something that you've heard other people experiencing as well.
Yes, faces. In fact, in the process, I'm actually writing a book. I'm finishing it. In the process of doing that, I read through a bunch of my old journals. And in the beginning, when I was using a lot of these binaural beats, I saw lots and lots of faces. To me, I feel like that's sort of one of the beginning things that happens when you start to have more connection, say, to that universal mind, we'll say, and it's potentially other kind of beings and consciousnesses showing up. They just kind of show up. They're not necessarily scary or unusual or recognizable. Have you had a chance to interact with any of those faces yet?
No, I have been asking who they are, but I haven't gotten there much. I believe that I've made contact with what I want to call my higher awareness or my higher self or my spirit guide. I'm hearing some of that stuff. This is wonderful that we can have this conversation because I'm assuming that since people have found this on YouTube that they're already awakening and exploring these things, so we can go a little deeper. Eben, I wanted to ask, have you, since your coma, have you been able to get back to that state or anything close, because you spoke about that hyper reality? I don't quite experience a hyper reality when I'm in these things, so I'm wondering about your ability to go back there.
Right. Well, I was first attracted to this concept of binaural beats about 2 years after awakening from coma. And for your listeners who don't know, my story is told in Proof of Heaven. I had a week-long coma due to bacterial meningitis. It was very severe, drove me into coma within 3 hours of symptom onset. And all of those medical records from my illness are now available in a case report that came out September 2018 in Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases. So anyway, that is also available on my website. If you go to ebenalexander.com, look at blogs, and 2 blogs ago is when I commented a lot on that medical record report. But I was trying to duplicate that. The big mystery was, why was it that progressive destruction of my neocortex, which is the hallmark of a very severe bacterial meningeal encephalitis, why would it be that such destruction would open the awareness of my mind to have a far richer, more ultra-real, vibrant and alive and interactive and meaningful journey than anything that can happen with my brain intact? Why was it that getting the brain out of the way did such an extraordinary job of illuminating so much more to me? And that's what I've been chasing. It's kind of the holy grail for me, is to get back to that. So beginning about 2 years after coma, so for the last 8 years or so, I've been using this kind of sound, using Sacred Acoustics most recently. And of course, I helped with some of the early development work of Sacred Acoustics. So Sacred Acoustics is a crucial player for me in enabling this. And the good news for everybody is you don't have to die or almost die to get this. By going within consciousness, all of us can learn a tremendous amount. The more effort we put into it, the more we get out of it. But for me, Sacred Acoustics is a very good way of returning to these realms. I try to meditate an hour or two a day. Sometimes my main intention for a meditation of several hours is to go back into my NDE, not just to recover memories, but in an ongoing set of building relationships with the entities, beings, with the infinite power of unconditional love, every bit of that, and going back there.
What about the hyperreality?
That's a very good point. I must say, in spite of all of my best efforts over the last 8 years, I've not yet fully duplicated that kind of shocking level of ultra reality, that more than half of near-death experiencers describe. More than half of them coming back saying that world is much more real than this world. And that ultra reality is not something that I've been able to duplicate as fully as it occurred in my NDE, although that's not to say that I can't do that with continued effort.
Right. It's pretty fascinating that our brains sort of seem to be this great gift and this great barrier at the same time that take us away from that stuff. Are you able to have experiences that you know for certain are legitimate experiences? Every time I come out, if I've heard a voice or I feel like I've gotten a message, I immediately go into, well, you probably just were thinking that. That's just you, Do you get to a point?
Let me just say, you got to be real careful with what you consider a legitimate experience, because so many of these things that we have happen inside our consciousness are known only to us. And so over time, you really have to develop a discernment, as you're asking, is it valid or am I just making it up? But you also have to develop a trust in your own inner knowing. And so very often we can't validate all of these things that we find except over time in our own lives. I know you had something to add.
Well, I would just say that the trust is a crucial concept that Karen brings up. Trust is something I gained tremendously on my near-death experience. Trust that the universe would give me much of what I needed. The answers would come, and that's why I encourage people in these meditative states is just ask. When you see things that are not making sense and you're kind of wondering, why is the universe showing me that face or this scene or what have you, ask, what am I to know from this? And I've gained a tremendous amount of trust in the universe because the universe comes through. It ends up giving me the information I need. Now, in Living in a Mindful Universe, I tell a very kind of prolonged and interesting to me, fascinating story about encountering the soul of my father, who had not been present to me in my NDE. He had passed over 4 years before my coma, yet I've developed a very profound relationship with him through this kind of meditative experience. And you'll see in that particular story, I talk about exactly how often the information is presented as kind of a puzzle. So we're often given a homework assignment by the universe, so we can ask the universe to prove to us or supply the information that helps us to link together the information it's giving us in a way that's meaningful in our lives, but also be ready to do the homework, be ready to do some investigation and take notes, keep a journal. These meditations can present tremendous information. Often the answer comes before the question. So you really have to be kind of open about your belief system and about this ability to communicate. It's an extraordinary channel of information. And of course, remember that what we're doing is realizing the little rational voice in our head, that linguistic voice, which is also the voice of our ego, is not who we are. So many people in our modern culture think that I am, those little thoughts running through Eben Alexander's head. And that's the extent of it. And that the ultimate knowledge that Eben Alexander can gain is through that little linguistic brain. But what I've come to realize is, no, that's not true at all. In fact, putting that little linguistic brain or the voice of the ego, as Michael Singer puts it in his book, The Untethered Soul, he calls that voice in the head the annoying roommate. Important to keep that little view in mind and put that little roommate into timeout, because our conscious awareness is far, far grander than just the awareness of Eben Alexander living in this little body, birth to death, and nothing more. Our consciousness is a far bigger mystery, whether you're talking about the measurement paradox in quantum physics, which is a deep, deep question for modern science about the modern nature of consciousness, or whether you're talking about the hard problem of consciousness, which is within the world of neuroscience and philosophy of mind, the impossibility of trying to somehow make mind and consciousness perfectly explicable as just the results of brain processes. That is not the way it works. There's a much deeper reality going on, which puts consciousness as primordial. And these kind of journeys of exploration are ways of developing that relationship with our higher soul, which is so crucial. That's the part of us that expands at the time of physical death, when the brain and body come to an end and our consciousness is actually set free. And this is something we can explore through using sacred acoustics and a regular process of meditation, of going within and kind of playing with the universe to seek answers to some of these deep questions.
I love that so much of the information that we're being exposed to during this period of heightened awareness for human beings seems to all tether together. There's a corroboration that goes between everything. Karen, your stuff with Sacred Acoustics, you go back, thousands of years with Tibetan Buddhist monks who are chanting Om and setting up the vibrations. We recently went to a salt cave where they did a crystal bowl sound generation in the salt cave, and it created experiences like I have never experienced. So all of this stuff ties together. Eben, you came out talking about soul groups, and I've been coming across that from other teachers as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Soul groups, soul contracts. Do you guys feel like you are a part of one of those that has come together?
Well, I would say that's very much the case. Of course, that's the kind of thinking I never would have entertained before my coma. As a rationalist, a materialist, a neuroscientist, kind of neurosurgeon, and yet I've come to realize that is absolutely at the core of all that we're discovering about the nature of consciousness, about the nature of human experience. Is we are truly spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe, and this is something that many quantum physicists, in many ways, would support. They would acknowledge the reality of the mental universe. That is, that there's a top-down organizational principle that's very active in the world of quantum physics that has to do with this kind of expanded awareness. And all of that has to do with recognizing that we're truly sharing one mind, that we're part of one consciousness. Our kind of sense of self and a sense of here now in many ways is an illusion, but we are connected with each other. And that soul group concept is one, I would say in essence, your soul group has no boundaries. It's every soul that you've ever interacted with in this beautiful journey of teaching and learning, of self kind of discovery, of the great mind, of the primordial mind, and I believe that the hardships in life. This is something that was very clear to me after my coma. That the hardships in life, the illness, the injury, the challenges, are gifts. They are the stepping stones that we use to progress in this world. And so what I would say is another piece that we haven't covered yet, but is totally, absolutely essential to getting any of this, is realizing that reincarnation is absolutely real. Because to try and look at this as one incarnation, birth to death, nothing more, is completely befuddling. None of it makes sense that way. And yet, when you look at the scientific evidence for reincarnation, for example, the work out of University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies, where in the last 60 years they've identified more than 2,700 cases of past life memories in children indicative of reincarnation. So there's major league scientific evidence for the reality of reincarnation. So we just need to step up to that much bigger view. And when you realize that, what you see is that NDEs are just trying to point out to us that when we die, our consciousness expands. We go through a life review where we encounter souls of departed loved ones. If we've been busy handing out pain and suffering to others, that life review will not be very pleasant, because the life review is a beautiful example of how the boundaries of self are part of this fiction. Because a life review, when you talk to near-death experiencers, you experience it on behalf of those affected by your thoughts and actions. You don't experience your life review as yourself. And this is where it has such instructive potential. And that, of course, is what happens when we reunite with our higher souls and soul groups. We go through the life review. Any lessons we cannot complete within this lifetime with that life review might be bundled into the challenges and hardships of the next lifetime. So best to clear it all up, because the most direct pathway towards ascendance, towards that oneness with the divine, which is the whole purpose of this evolution of consciousness, is really that kind of growth. And that's what we are here to do. And that's, but the growth comes through facing the hardships. That's the point I'm trying to get at. And so, in essence, that notion of the soul contract, or the soul agreement that we make with our fellow, soul group members before we even come into this lifetime, has to do with those hardships and difficulties we're going to face. And I think that that's a crucial agreement. To me, it makes all the difference in the world to really understand this and know that, in essence, it makes human existence kind of like a dance, a tango between the stepping stones of those hardships and difficulties and challenges, and the ability to use our free will in the heat of the moment, living these lives, to manifest love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy for self and for others in all of our activities. And that is really the lesson that humanity has been charged to learn in these few thousand years. That is why this awakening is so important. But it has a lot to do with that notion of kind of soul agreements, and the fact that we live these lives with free will. Because modern materialist science would tell you there's no such thing as free will, because they believe that consciousness is just the accidental epiphenomenon of chemical reactions and electron fluxes in the brain. That's what I believed before my coma. That's completely false. That's backwards. That's why quantum physicists and neuroscientists have had so much difficulty understanding consciousness. When you put consciousness as primordial, then it all starts to make more sense, and that has everything to do with the soul groups and with the evolution of consciousness itself.
It's fascinating to me that the two of you came together to create this like super duo that is out there to awaken people and spread this message. The message that you brought back that was so powerful to me was, you are loved and you can do no wrong. And when you take that has a tendency to blow up a lot of people's belief systems. You know, we're so motivated by guilt and self-hatred and judging ourselves. And if you can get to that, you know, what a freeing space that is to be in. It's absolutely amazing. I can't thank you guys enough for being here with me. It's so extraordinary to be able to speak with you about this stuff. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask, when we start to awaken, it begins to, like I said, dissolve our world. The things that were important to us, maybe our priorities change and we have a hard time. What was it like those first 6 months after coma? Did you try to return to work? Was that even possible? For me, sometimes I have a hard time getting up and doing what I have to do every day because it feels so not in line with where I want to be headed, you know?
Well, it was an amazing experience, and I talk about a lot of that in Living in a Mindful Universe, about those first few months. 2 months, I'd had full recovery, and yet I was deeply mystified because I was going back to doctors, talking over my whole medical situation, going through the medical records, the neurologic exams, etc., and realizing, well, wait a minute, this doesn't allow for any kind of conscious awareness deep in coma. And not only that, how could I recover? That's why I think that case report is so important. But it was a tremendous challenge. And those first 6 months were just an extraordinary roller coaster of ups and downs of trying to figure all this out. And of course, those who've read Proof of Heaven will realize the extraordinary exclamation mark I got about my journey 4 months after coma, when I discovered the identity of that beautiful guardian angel on the butterfly wing. It was a tremendous shocker. But this is really... that was just the beginning of 10 years of incredible discovery, and that's why I think Living in a Mindful Universe is a very good resource. I would recommend to your listeners that they participate in a free 33-day email course at ebenalexander.com. It'll give you a tremendous amount of information out of that book, the concepts from the book, but also in a setting where more than 6,000 people have participated in this course and left comments and everything. So people should go to ebenalexander.com, and right there is a banner, your 33-day journey into the heart of consciousness. I would recommend it. It's completely free, and I think it will be an eye-opener for many people to learn how they can join this incredible awakening and revolution in human thought that is very liberating for the human being and for all of humanity and life on Earth.
It also includes some Sacred Acoustics recordings, and I just want to connect a few dots in my mind from some of the things that you said, Val, and that is that a lot of this is not new information. When you say that, you know, you're getting into this and you're hearing things from different factions and finding that there's some commonalities that cross over, those are what I call the universal truths. And these are truths that I've been looking for since I was a young child. I was confused by the different religions and schools of thought out there, and I wanted to know, well, there has to be a truth for all of us. And what I found was that all of these different spiritual traditions, even secular traditions, start to have some commonalities. And one of those that is so well known is that golden rule, that we treat others like we would treat ourselves. And so often we're so concerned about, well, how do we treat people kindly who aren't like us or who disagree with us? And I would say that's not where we should begin. Where we should begin is with really loving ourselves. We need to love our neighbors like we love ourselves. But if we don't love ourselves properly, then we're not going to get anywhere with loving our neighbors. And that's where the sound really helped me so much. I found when I would listen to Sacred Acoustics recordings, very often it would trigger emotions in me that I didn't know where they were coming from. And eventually I realized they were stored emotional traumas that I hadn't properly processed from the past. And this allowed me to kind of re-feel those feelings without necessarily analyzing and letting them go. And the more of these traumas that I released through listening to sounds of Sacred Acoustics, I was able to then replace it. When you start to release these tones, when you release these stored emotions, something has to replace it. And what happened was I became more aligned, I believe, with the spiritual essence of who I am. And that, for all of us, by our very nature of being human, is made of love. And so the more you can get in touch with that love, invite it into your body and radiate it out into the world, the more that you truly become the love that we really are at the core. Our spiritual natures are made of love. It's a binding force that connects us to others. It's something that science is just barely starting to understand, but we can all experience it in our daily lives by becoming more of that love. And then you'll find that loving your neighbor is so natural. Your mind doesn't get in the way. You just are that binding force of love. And this comes over time and practice. All of us can learn to do this. I was very influenced by the work of Heart Math. They recommend that you start by simply generating a feeling of gratitude in your heart center. Not a thought of gratitude, a feeling of gratitude. It's not easy to do. It should be, but it's not. And we can all learn how to do this. It's the first step in making our world a much better place.
Thank you guys so very much for joining me here. I'm excited to have you here, and we want to get this out to everybody that we can. It's wonderful what you're doing. Oh, you said you're writing a new book. Do you have a title yet?
I don't. It's actually the working title is The Ultimate Golden Rule, but I don't know that will stick. Publishers have a tendency to change titles, and I'll try and make it fit. But it's a memoir of raising my daughter, my relationships with my father, and and her relationship with her father. It's things we all go through, and when you look back in your life, you realize that maybe it was a script, and that's kind of how mine turned out. And I hope other people will enjoy and learn from it.
It's a fantastic book. I can't wait till it gets out to this world. It brings so many of these lessons in a beautiful, friendly way that people can really absorb, assimilate beautifully into their own lives.
Heartbreaks and all.
Yeah, all the freckles and warts and everything.
All right, so the websites are sacredacoustics.com and ebenalexander.com. All of the information people will be looking for are available there. I still have a ton of questions and more conversation I want to have with you guys, so maybe we can do that again another time.
Well, let's do. We'd love to. That'd be great. Just let us know when you want to talk again.
All right, thank you very much. Have a lovely day, and thank you for being here.
All right, Bill. Thank you so much. Good talking with you.
Okay, bye-bye.
We'll talk soon. Bye now.